Okay, welcome everyone. We are at Club DSPORT. Joining me over here is little Nikki. And today we're going to do a couple things. We want to talk to you about high boost solutions. If you're out there and you're a native of Puerto Rico or somebody else who likes to run a lot of boost, we're going to help you out with a solution here. Some of the things you can do to machine your block to control all that combustion pressure you get when you're running 40, 50, 60, 70 pounds of boost. What's off the shelf isn't going to work in most cases. So we're going to show you some of the things that we do here at the Club DSPORT machine shop on different applications to basically take care of that. While we're doing this, Sam's over in the corner. We don't need to pan to him because he's new, so he doesn't get to be on camera. But he's going to be checking on this Facebook Live right now and looking for questions and stuff. And then he'll try to tell us the question. His voice is kind of soft. He has a very heavy accent. But we're going to work through it today. We're going to work through it today. That's the important thing. Okay, so boost, big boost. Big boost on a turbocharged car, it's going to give you a lot of torque. Anytime you're talking about heavy amounts of torque, you're talking about high cylinder pressures. Anytime you're talking about high cylinder pressures, the fuse of the engine is generally that head gasket. When you get too much cylinder pressure, it tends to give way and fail so that the rest of the components in there don't get hurt. Well, when you start cranking up the boost and making more horsepower, you put in a great set of ARP head studs, like the CA625s, give you a lot more clamp load, and that's going to keep that head gasket in place. But sometimes that's just not enough. Even every head gasket's a little bit different. In fact, let's look at that first. This is the stock head gasket for an RB26. And this is what we call a composite gasket. And essentially, it's a material almost like cardboard in effect, or paper. And then they put these metal rings in here to help the combustion seal. And if we look at exactly how it puts pressure down on the cylinders, we can look here. This is Fuji paper. The more contact pressure you put on it, the darker the colors get. And we can see here, this is a RB30 head studs on a stock head gasket. This is what we're looking at for kind of our sealing. Doesn't look too bad, but you see areas where it's kind of light. You don't want that. You want these things to be as dark as possible and remain in place. But you see here, the cylinders on the outside of the engine tend to be the ones that are more prone to failure. Now let's take a look at this RB30 block. Not a big fan of RB30 blocks, but that's a whole different topic. But we've got a customer here wanting to do a full drag, looking for the maximum displacement he can get. He decided to go with the RB30 block. Now, the RB30 block we have here, he's probably going to make between 1,500 and 2,000 horsepower. So just getting a real high quality head gasket, machining everything perfectly flat, and using the ARP 625 plus, custom age 625 plus head studs isn't usually enough. I mean, that works great up to probably about 30 pounds of boost, maybe 35. Once you go past that, O-rings are going to be a must. And basically how we do that is we cut an actual groove into the deck surface of the block. This one's been cut here already. And so that's actually, if we looked at it and magnified it up close, it's actually a square groove like this. So that's what it is. And the width here, in this case, is about 40 thousandths of an inch, or about 1 millimeter. And what we're going to do to make an O-ring is we're going to put an O-ring in here. Forgive my circles, this is probably going to look pretty bad. Okay, well, pretend it's bigger and it's touching on the sides here, because the diameter of this thing here is a 0.041 inch. So it's actually bigger than the groove we cut for it. So that's going to actually give it some interference, hold it in place. And what you want to use here is a 304. If you're using stainless, we'll get into that in a little bit, when you should use stainless, when you should use copper. But if you're using stainless, you want a 304 stainless steel that's annealed. And kind of show you the difference here. This isn't an annealed piece of 304 stainless, and as you can see, you bend it and it holds the shape. And in this case, what we're going to be doing, we're going to make it round to fit the cylinder, so it'll hold that. I think somewhere around here, Somebody will probably try to grab it while we're talking. We've got some spring steel. You don't want spring steel. Spring steel springs back to its original shape. It's a harder substance. It's definitely not what we want. It's the wrong heat treat for what we want. Sam, how are we doing? Any questions so far?
No questions so far.
No questions so far. Okay, so we caught you guys off guard this morning. Oh, here we go.
Spring steel.
This is the spring steel here. Little Nicky's going to open that up and show you what we got there. Originally, the customer supplied this for the installation, and we went to go ahead and do it. And once we found out how springy this material was, it was pretty obvious we couldn't do it. There you go, spring steel. So it just bounces back. You can bend it a little bit, but it doesn't want to hold it. It wants to kind of fling back, and you won't get that if you use the proper material.
It's also impossible to file.
It's also impossible to file. Okay, so let's get in the O-ring first, because this is going to take a little bit of time. So we'll see the process, and then kind of as we cut away, I'll talk more about the science and the technology about what that O-ring is going to do. So the first step, we've cut this all on the CNC machine. Basically what we've done is we've decked the entire block here exactly parallel to the crankshaft center line. So this is exactly 2 parallel lines. This has been machined down, and then it's been lapped. It's actually been lapped on top of that. That gets it a very, very, very smooth finish. The RA of this finish is probably below 10. And then after that, we go ahead and we put the O-ring grooves in. So we machine these grooves in. These 5 have already been put in. We're just joining you today to show you the last one here. Now the first step in doing this, after this has been cut, is deburring. Cleaning and deburring. If you're really looking for the top type of engine performance and top assembly and stuff, you spend a lot of time doing that. We probably spend 60-70% of the time on an engine on deburring and cleaning again and deburring and just making sure everything's taken care of there. What he's using here, this is a ceramic deburring knife, and he's going in that square groove there, which after machining is going to have some sharp edges, and he's going through and he's deburring it, and that's just kind of breaking that little piece off of there. And he'll go around maybe like 2 or 3 times more, being careful not to let it slip and damage the deck surface. So what is going to happen once we get that O-ring in there? Well, this is the stock head gasket. Now let's look at an aftermarket head gasket. They're all going to be a bit different. This is the Tomei head gasket, the Tomei USA, Tomei powered USA head gasket. Here we went with a higher clamping load force. Here we got 140 foot-pounds with the ARP6A CA625 Plus. I'll get it right once today. And as you can see, there is a definite improvement, but we're still seeing some areas that would be a bit of a concern. So here, between cylinders is basically our concern here. Even with a decent quality, a good quality aftermarket head gasket, we're seeing that here. Now, not all head gaskets by themselves are going to do that. Some of them have a little bit higher protrusion in kind of the combustion ring that they put in here, or they have a folded layer, a stopper. You'll hear all these different terms. And if it actually is folded over, it's one of the better ways of doing it. If it's just kind of embossed in there, like a lot of, say, the Cometic gaskets, a lot of them are just embossed. If you don't use an O-ring with those, you can have sealing issues at high boost. So, and we also, with the Tomei gasket, we prefer always to use an O-ring with the Tomei gasket. Now, there's other gaskets out there, and let me see if I can find one here. Let's see here. Okay, so here's the Apex gasket, and this is no O-ring here. And we see with the Apex gasket, we're getting a lot more. It's a thinner seal, but it's a lot more defined. And you can see, adding the O-ring to the Apex, we get a really a strong red ring. As we do, let's see here. I think I've got a Tomei with an O-ring, and that's probably one of the best looking ones you'll find out there. Is the Tomei with an O-ring gives you extremely, extremely good seal. So one of the things to consider there. Since we don't just do engine builds here, we really try to do development and learn different things. We use products like this Fuji paper to go through and make assessments so that if we decide to offer anything to the public or through the tuning shop network out there, we're sure it works for you. So, Nick, how's it coming so far?
Pretty good. Just deburred it, and I don't know if you want to explain why we kind of made these marks for ourselves.
Yeah, so, okay, so let's look over here. If we look at a top-down view of the O-ring groove, it's a circle, of course, and the wire that we're putting in there is going to have a gap. I mean, there's going to be a gap because we're using a straight piece of wire. It has two ends to it, and so what Nick's already done to this one here is he's squared it off and deburred it already to make it perfectly square, so that the edge of it, you know, a lot of times when you look at the edge of a piece of wire, if you cut it with snips, it kind of looks like that. And what you need to do is either file or grind it so you can get it flat. This is what you want, because you're going to have two flat pieces butting up against each other when it's installed properly. Okay, so he's deburred it already. He's gone through this ridge, and what that did is any type of little pieces of metal and stuff that were stuck here, he went ahead and basically got those basically taken away so that they're not going to cause any issues there with the fitment. And it also leaves it kind of a nicer surface. If you leave them in there, you'll see it kind of flake and break out from it. So little Nicky here is probably going to have to get a little bit of a hand here, but he's basically putting in the O-ring, which is just a straight piece of wire. It's about 12 inches long, and it needs to be about 11.5 inches long. And you see the tool. Let's look at the tools that he's using here. He's using a very expensive, I think we got this at Daiso, hammer, which isn't too special. You don't need anything too crazy for the hammer. But he is using a piece of nylon, a nylon rod here, which doesn't mar the surface and doesn't cause any issues to the stainless steel as he's installing it here. And once again, this is about a ½ inch longer than it needs to be. So we're going to see as he gets near the end here what he needs to do. And if Sam gets off his social media, we'll answer those questions for you. I know he's checking the social media right now on his Tinder account or something.
Any questions yet?
Yeah, do we got some questions?
No questions.
No questions. Wow, I must be doing a great job or nobody's watching. It's one or the other.
Everyone's at work.
Well, the last time, as you guys remember, Tyler, we hire the handicap here. The government does give us extra money, and Tyler was our cameraman last time. And he had us doing some weird things out there. Yeah, so, you know, the video swapping this way and doing this and out of focus and not HD. But I'm not blaming him at all. I mean, he was just the operator of the camera and the person who set it up. So let's see here. So let's talk about, Nick, tell us what you're doing right here.
Right now, I'm just kind of giving it a rough estimate of the length I want for the final measurement. Like what Mike was saying, because I'm going to use the snips because there's such a long piece left, and it's going to leave that point. So I want to leave myself enough room to be able to, you know, get a nice flat edge like the bottom drawing he has right there. So just to make it easy on myself, make a nice little mark right there so I don't mess anything up.
And how much are you leaving there? Like another 30 thousandths, a millimeter, 40 thousandths or so?
Yeah, maybe a millimeter and a half,
Okay.
60 thousandths.
Okay, so leaving a little bit of extra material here as he's going to just go ahead and use the pliers to cut it. Question?
Yes.
Okay.
Julio, he said, what turbo are you guys going to run?
What turbo are we going to run? I have no idea on this guy, what he's going to be running. I know this is going to be a big horsepower car. I believe it's a single turbo setup, if I remember right. But yeah, he'll be probably in the 15 to 2,000 horsepower range with it. There's more things that you have to do to the RB30 block to put it in an all-wheel drive application. It gets really expensive. I mean, by the time you go through an RB30 block, if you really want it to make that kind of power, you might want to just consider buying a billet block. I mean, there's a lot of machine work to get everything right. And we'll probably be doing, hopefully be doing something, a build here in the future with one of the billet blocks and kind of talk about the pluses and minuses of those. Of course, the biggest minus being the cost, but a lot of other advantages to them, and we'll go over that.
And then second question, Justin, what kind of wire are you using?
Okay, so the wire, Justin, you must have joined us a little bit late. It's a 304 stainless steel, and it's annealed. Probably can't read my handwriting, so I'll say it again. 304 stainless steel, annealed. It's an 041. Where's that package? Got that package somewhere? All right. You can see right here. That's the exact one that we're using. And let's talk about, so okay, let's take a look real quick at what Nick's doing here, so you guys kind of get an idea. He's using the Nipix pliers, and they're a smooth jaw plier, so it doesn't leave any marks on it. And hopefully he'll be able to adjust it back. And he's basically going to hold it as close to the edge as he can. Notice he put down some 3M blue tape. It's got a microfiber here, microfiber towel here, and he's using a specific stainless steel fine file. So this file is made for stainless steel. You can get it off like a McMaster or something like that. Forgot to charge all these people that were throwing out their brands out there. And let's see. Hey, Johnny, can you grab me the set of the regular head studs and the CA625? Now the other thing on this block in particular, the RB30, it only comes with an 11 millimeter head stud. Another problem with it. I mean, they weren't meant to be used for high performance. It was about 140 horsepower, single overhead cam, taxi engine or something like that. But you know, give the Australians anything, and they're gonna figure a way to hack it and make some big power from it. So another question.
What is the benefit of putting the wire rather than not putting it in?
Okay, very good. I hope you joined us late, or you're just not very intelligent, but I'm going to thank you for your question anyway. So, what is the purpose of putting in the wire? The wire is going to push up. If we look here, you know, here's our cylinder head. Here's our deck surface. And if we just have a gasket in there, that's just you know, a piece of material, it's just going to get sandwiched in there, and there's not going to be any high pressure areas. But if we put an O-ring in the block like this, and notice how I draw it, how it's protruding a bit, your O-ring's actually going to sit above the deck surface. And when you do that, it's actually going to transfer additional force and clamping force right here in that whole area. So now, in the area that you have, if we look top down, now we've got a nice strong ring of pressure that's sealing in combustion pressure. So that is why we do it. And just kidding about that. You know, thank you very much for that question. And if we can look at it visually here, as we're talking about, here's the stock head gasket, and then we look at something with an O-ring like the Tomei, and you can see how much darker this is and how deep it is. Notice also thinner. So on some of the aftermarket head gaskets, they go to a thinner one. Anybody know why? Okay, well, if we remember, pressure is what? How do we measure pressure? Well, boost pressure, we talk about pounds per square inch. So what it is any type of pressure we're talking about is going to be your force divided by area. Okay? And I apologize once again for my handwriting. Force divided by area. So, if you decrease the amount of pressure you have there, there's going to be more. If you decrease the amount of area, the contact area, by making it thinner, there's going to be more pressure there. So that actually puts a higher pressure ring of force around that cylinder. So it takes a lot more cylinder pressure to push out past it. Hopefully that answers your question. So Nick, how's it coming here?
Good. Just about to put the last end in right here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, Tyler. I don't know if you can tell, but there is just a little bit of an overhang. And I put that there to ensure that we're going to make a... zoom out a little bit, Tyler. So it's going to make a really nice contact. So it's going to be kind of butted up like that. And I'm going to tuck in one end and then push it in. So it's going to make a real tight seal in there.
So actually the wire is going to be longer than the length of the actual O-ring groove. And by that, it'll actually be forced in there as you know, it'll cause an Amber Alert at times if you have too much. So now mine's going off too, and probably this hopefully doesn't disrupt our broadcast right here. Let's see here, Touch ID.
Presidential alert.
President.
There's one more question.
Okay, let's get this question.
What are some of the pros and cons of building the RB26 versus the RB30?
Okay, we'll get into that. That's a good one. Let's save that for the last as we get this finished up. So right here, what he's doing is he's actually taking that wire and he's got one that's already in the groove and the other one he's putting up against it, and you'll see after he taps it in there that the wire is actually longer than, you see how it's sticking up here? So now he's going to work that back in, and two things can happen here. He could have gotten it perfect and it'll all work great. He could have made it a little too long and it will basically bounce itself out and we'll just have to trim it a little bit more. How you like it?
Perf.
Okay, now cool. Did we talk about, oh, you know what? I forgot to talk about this. Nick went through and he marked the different areas where we actually put that gap. And what you want to do, you want to put that gap opposite of a head stud. Head bolt, head stud, whatever. And pick the one that is furthest away from any water jackets. If we pick this one, we're close to this water jacket. If we pick this one, we're close to that water jacket. We pick this one, we're close to that water jacket. So better than doing any of that, pick one that's furthest away from a water jacket, and on the RB you'll end up there, 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 and then as you come across the other three cylinders, there, there, and there. So that's where we put the gaps on them. Okay, any more questions before I get into RB26 versus RB30? Any more questions? Are we done with this, Nick?
Yeah,
I forgot to ask.
we're good.
We're good.
We're good.
Okay, so entire process here should take you about, your first time you're going to screw it up. Be careful. You're going to do it a couple times. Don't put the thing all the way in unless it's perfect, because it can be impossible to get out. And then you probably have to bring it back to the machine shop, have them remachine it for a bigger O-ring. It's just a nightmare, so don't do it. Don't mess it up. But the process of putting them in, they take you about 15 to 20 minutes each. As you get used to it, you'll get better. But that's basically it for the O-ring. Why do we use the O-ring? A better sealing ring around the combustion chamber. Lets us run higher torque out of the engine, higher cylinder pressures, more boost pressure. Clamping force, let's talk about that real quick. Got two different head studs here. The material of the head stud and the size, the dimensions of the head stud are going to affect how much clamping force they put down. The RB30 engine, as we talked about some differences from the RB26, RB30 only has an 11 millimeter head stud, kind of like the Toyota Supra, the 2JZ. Only 11 millimeter head stud. There's only so much clamping force you can get out of that. RB26 has a 12 millimeter. On this engine, we went ahead and re-drilled and tapped all these so that we can use the 12 millimeter RB26 studs in it. Now, that's the one thing, the dimensions of it. Also the material. Now, this is an ARP2000. It's a very good, high-quality steel. It's about, I think, 200,000 PSI of ultimate tensile strength, I think it is, or its yield, whatever it is. Let's just say that's 200,000. Now, with the CA625, we're getting to the 260 to 280 range. So we're getting something that has a lot more clamping load, and it'll show in just the torque that you can put on it. With the standard ones, I think these are rated at 100 or 105 foot-pounds of torque that you're going to use. These are, I think, 140 foot-pounds of torque on the same engine, same size. So it gets you kind of an idea. We can go into other things. We don't use a torque wrench for the final settings. As our only indicator, we actually use an angle torque so that we can actually put an equal amount of force on there. Yes?
Question. Are the filed rings reusable after tightening, removing cylinder head?
Are they reusable? Since it's stainless steel, in most cases, you don't have to replace them. Now, unless the deck of the engine or something got warped, then you're kind of really screwed at that point, because you'd have to probably surface grind them flat and or cut them out and not have an O-ring groove in there, or put a bigger O-ring in. A lot of things can happen. But in just normally servicing the engine, if everything is done right and you didn't overheat the block and there's no reason why it warped, it should pretty much last forever. Now, copper is a different story. The copper is a lot softer, and most of the time you're going to need to kind of replace that. The stainless steel works great in the real racing applications and stuff like that. it is good. You got to be careful on how much you offset it. You know, we talked about the height here. You know, if you're using a metal head gasket, you might only want it to protrude 6 to 8 thousandths, depending on how that gasket is made. It's really the only way to know is to do the test with the Fuji paper, and then you can know exactly what you need for every combination. But in that case, on the coppers, we usually protrude them a bit more. They might be up 8 to 10 to 12 thousandths, because they're going to actually get mashed down more, and they're going to kind of stay that way. So depending on the material, with stainless steel, you're pretty much set for life as long as nothing warps like that. And if with the stainless, with the copper, you're probably gonna have to replace that.
Someone asked what was the question, Sam, about the difference between an RB30 and RB26?
Yeah, what are the pros and cons of a RB26 versus a RB30?
Well, you want to start? I mean,
I was just gonna. The biggest difference you're gonna see right here is the deck height on an RB26. It comes about 9.5 inches, and an RB30 we're almost up to around 11.5. So
yeah. So if you look at the side of the block, you can see on this side here this whole kick here of this coolant channel, where it is on that engine, where it is on this engine. There's a lot more deck height to this engine. That lets it use a longer stroke. On the RB26, factory stroke is 73.7 millimeters, and the bore size is 86, so you get 2.6 liters. On an RB30, your factory stroke's 86 millimeters with an 86 bore. That gives you 3 liters. So advantages, disadvantages. I think low power stuff, RB30 can be a decent platform to build if you don't want to go high RPM. If you're kind of cool with like 500 to 600 horsepower, RB30 is a pretty good route to go. If you want more than that, RB26 is probably the best route to go, but it's really expensive. And to make the RB30 able to handle 1,000 to 1,500 horsepower and beyond, it's even more expensive. See if you guys can get a hand and move this. We'll show you one of the things you have to do on the RB30 block here. I don't know, maybe you guys can use the crane or something if you need. But yeah, on the RB30 block, there's just a lot of machine work you got to do to really make it capable of high horsepower handling. The crankshaft itself too is not as nice as the RB26 cranks in terms of its strength and stuff. So if you don't go to a full aftermarket crank, which you're going to pay, a good quality U.S. built crank, you might spend $3,500 to $4,500 to get one made. As we attempt not to destroy this block that we already have about 60 hours of machine work into. So as you can see here on the bottom of this block, you'll see this big aluminum piece that's here, and it serves two purposes. One is it reinforces the RB30 girdle with all these countersunk screws that go in here. I don't have them all in right now, just temporarily there. But it'll actually go into the, do we have a girdle?
Yeah.
Kind of shaft? It'll go into the girdle, go into the block. This has kind of become popular. You'll see this on a couple different applications. I don't know how effective it is, considering it's just M8 bolts, but it's better than nothing. But in the case of like this engine, we had to go through and we had to machine this flat. We have to machine the rail flat. We have to make sure that the distance between those two is exactly the distance between this. This piece here, it says it's on revision, what was it, 14? Revision 14. Well, they might get it right by revision 21 at this pace, because there was a lot of modification we still had to do to make it fit everything. But then again, there's no other options out there. So you're going to be stuck getting this, not to badmouth them, no, it fits pretty well in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of areas where you do have to clearance, and it's not all their fault. There's things with castings and stuff that shift, so it's hard to make a precision part that goes over things that were previously cast. But what this allows you to do, besides strengthening the bottom end, it lets you put the all-wheel drive pan on there, because the RB30 was not meant for use in an all-wheel drive application. So give you an idea, all the machine work and stuff we've got to do in order to get that in there. It's a pain. It's definitely a pain in the butt to do it. And that's why I said if you really want to go that route of a large...
Also, it's single cam head.
single cam head originally. Yeah, so you're going to put the RB26 head on there. You also have to relocate the tensioner, so a little bit of machine work. We haven't done that one on this. It's about the last thing we have to do on this. But yeah, so RB30, you got more displacement, but you give up the ability to rev it high. And this is, I'm talking RB30 with an RB26 head on it. If you kept it RB30 alone, you're just an idiot. Sorry. But that's just the truth. So, any other questions here? What else we got?
No more questions.
No more questions. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us. It ran a lot longer than I thought it would, but hopefully you saw a little bit of what we're doing here at Club DSPORT with the RBs, and we'll keep you in touch on how this one's running in the future. Stay tuned.